Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is now 2:02. So I did ask for one question on the left. Looks like most of you did answer it. What's your current skill level with the new item grid? Looks like we have about half the class doesn't have any experience with it yet, and the other half considers themselves intermediate. So that's helpful to me. So thanks for answering that question today. So today is day 2 in the IMA for Beginners webinar series, and we'll be covering a new item grid setup. I am recording the webinar. Like I mentioned yesterday, that recording is going to be sent out a little bit later as I get used to this new application and fix the issue with my computer at the moment. But I will be sending those out once I get that resolved. And the PowerPoints, if you did not see them in the email and you weren't on yesterday, if you look on the right side of your screen, you will see a files for download pod, and that has all 4 of the PowerPoint presentations for this week. If you select it and then click download, you can download those directly from this webinar. So if you could please put yourself in Do Not Disturb status on all messaging apps and close all email applications until the session is over, that will ensure that you get the most that you can out of the session. I have muted all participants at this point. At the end of the presentation, I will reactivate interactive talk mode in case you want to ask any final questions at the end. But in the meantime, please use the chat pod on the bottom right corner of the screen to ask any questions during the presentation. So yesterday we covered the IMA basics and terminology. Today we're covering setting up new items in the new item grid. So for a couple of notes about manual item build. So we do require use of a data sync provider, but there are some exceptions where manual item build is necessary. And in those instances, it would be where there are certain carton types that cannot be synced over. We talked about these some yesterday. So if you have mixed cartons, assorted cartons, or pallets built in the system as pallets, not just shipping it that way, or sellable cartons, those actually cannot use data sync, and you do have to build it manually. We do plan to eventually offer a recurring webinar for manual item build, but at this point, that date is still TBD. We just don't have the resources to build that yet. So in the meantime, if you need immediate assistance with manual item build, please reach out to imahp@searshc.com. And I do want to just make a further note that if you're doing manual item build and you're not doing new item grid, today's session is all about new item grid. So you may not find this the best use of your time if you are only going to be doing manual setup. So over on the right side, you'll see that there is a question. Do you use a data sync provider, or do you manually build items? If you could take a second just to complete that, I just like to drive home the point that this webinar is for new item grid, not manual setup. So right now we have 3 people responding. So I'll give you guys just a few more seconds. Okay, it looks like we just have 4 people responding at this point. There's 5. So again, if you're doing just manual item build, unless you're just interested in learning about the new item grid, this might not be the best use of your time. So I just want to make you aware of that. So if you don't know what you're using, please reach out to either your vendor contact or maybe someone from your company. If you're a brand new vendor, you're probably going to be using data sync. If you're taking over responsibilities for somebody else from your company and you're not a brand new vendor, then it could go either way. So I would check with the other people you work with to see if anyone can let you know if you have a data sync account. So there are some other options as well. If you do not set up many items in the system. There's some vendors that only set up maybe 10 KSNs once a year. You may not find it the best use of your time to relearn how to do this every year. So if you'd like to, we do offer an item build program. It's $5 per G10. So for most typical items, that means $10 total per item. And if you would like more information on that, there is a link as well as an email. I don't work with the item build team at all, so you would have to contact them for additional information. So the purpose of today's session is to demonstrate how to set up new items using the new item grid. So after completing this session, you will be able to identify how to access IMA and IMA resources, demonstrate how to set up new items in the new item grid, and demonstrate how to utilize grid history to access in-process grids and review pending errors. So the topics we'll be covering to meet those goals will be IMA access and resources, the new item grid, and grid history. All right, so first we're going to be starting off with IMA access. So some of you may have already been in IMA. Some of you maybe have not even logged into IMA yet. But you should have access for your ID. Please do not use another team member's login to access IMA to do item setup. You can request that for your own ID. And to do that, you log into the vendor portal, and you're going to click My Profile in the menu bar. And then you scroll down and you click IMA. And then you select the box next to IMA, Item Maintenance Application. You scroll down and verify this information, and then you can click Save. So access will be processed within 2 business days. It's not going to be immediate. And if you are a new vendor, before you will actually be given access, you have to sync over items. And you sync over items from your data sync provider. Now, we don't have access to any of the data sync provider systems because there are several that you could choose from to use. So if you need assistance learning how to sync over from your data sync provider, you will have to reach out to your data sync provider. Because there's OpenText, which is also GXS. There's One World Sync, and those are the 2 main ones, but there are several more other third-party data sync providers. And like I said, I can't tell you how to sync over from them because we don't have access to their systems. They're completely separate from us. So please reach out to your contact with your data sync provider to learn how to sync over items. Once you have synced it over, then you'll be given access to IMA. Now, if you're an existing vendor and you're just taking over responsibilities for somebody else, you can just request IMA access through these steps here. So to access IMA from the portal, you can click IMA under Applications. You can also click this IMA button right up here at the top in the menu. And then on this page, this right here is the actual link to log in. Please always access the application from this page. If it's going to be down for a deploy for the system, or if there's some sort of system issue, we'll have a note here. If you bookmark the application directly, you won't be able to see any information about that. All right. So I have a question here for you on the right. True or false? New vendors must sync over items before they will be given IMA access. Go ahead and take a second to answer that, please. Okay, so looks like most of you got it right. That is true. You do have to sync over new items if you're a new vendor before you will be given access to IMA. Good job. Okay, so IMA system requirements. So if you could just take some time to write an answer out over on the right. What single issue do you think the help desk receives the most calls about? It's always interesting to see what people think because it seems to be always across the board on what people think is the issue with the most requests. I've got 2 responses so far. I'll give you just a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and broadcast these. All right, so some good guesses there. We have gaining access to IMA, system requirements, or approved/submitted before completing, and errors. All right, so the single issue that the help desk receives the most call about is actually browser compatibility, which goes under system requirements. So let's see who answered that one. Kathy, great job. You're the one who got the question correct, so great job guessing. Yeah, so it is the browser compatibility. So IMA should only be used with Internet Explorer. You should not be trying to access IMA through Chrome or Firefox. You may be able to log in, and you may be able to get a few screens to work for you, but eventually it's pretty much going to break on you. It's going to freeze, or your filters aren't going to be there, your scroll bar is going to be missing. So there's going to be an issue if you try to access with Chrome or Firefox. You can only use Internet Explorer. In addition to that, IMA was created to work with Internet Explorer 8. Now, pretty much nobody has Internet Explorer 8 still. I actually still had it until just a few months ago. They finally upgraded me to 11. So if you use a newer version, you have to actually set compatibility view, which we're going to go over in a couple of slides. Also requires a minimum of 2 gigabytes of RAM, as well as the Flash player to use the grid editing feature. So in Internet Explorer, you can click Help and then About Internet Explorer to see what version of Internet Explorer you are currently using. It's probably not 8. So then you could go ahead and set compatibility view settings. You can do that by clicking Tools and then Compatibility View Settings. Now, a quick tip, if you do not see the menu bar where Tools is an option, click the Alt button on your keyboard, and that will display the menu for your browser. I know on my laptop, I actually don't have the menu options. I have to click Alt so I can see the menu. So you click Tools and then Compatibility View Settings. It's going to bring up this window here. At this point, you click, or you enter mykmart.com, and then you click Add and then Close. Now, something you might want to be aware of, I know with work computers, you're constantly getting updates, system updates pushed out to your computer, and it's installing new software. So one thing that we have found is sometimes whenever you get those updates, it'll reset your compatibility view settings. So if you know that you've set this and you haven't had an issue, and then suddenly you're having some sort of weird issue where your screen's freezing, or maybe it's not creating the grid, or filters are missing, come back and check this and make sure that it's still set. If it's still set, then you can go ahead and reach out to the help desk. But if it's not there, then go ahead and just re-add mykmart.com. That is something that we have noticed is with the system updates, it can reset that sometimes. So any questions so far? I know for those of you that answered that you were kind of intermediate level, this is probably old news for you, but it's still something we need to go over for those who are brand new to IMA. All right, so I do have a question for you. Which is the only browser that should be used to access IMA? Okay, great job. You guys got it. Internet Explorer. So that's 5 less people that are going to be contacting the help desk about Internet Explorer. So good job. And one more question. Once compatibility settings have been updated, I will never have to set them again. True or false? Okay, so this is false. Like I said, sometimes if you're getting system updates pushed out to your computer, it can reset those compatibility settings, in which case you would need to go in and reset them. So again, if you've never had an issue and suddenly your browser's acting goofy, go in and check your compatibility settings. They may have been reset by a system update. All right. Okay, IMA help and resources. So within IMA, there's several links that you can access for help. If you click resources, it's going to drop down with this menu here. Now some of this is relevant to internal users and some of it's relevant to vendors because we have both using the application. So I tried to mark the ones that would be more relevant to you as a vendor. Up at the top, if you have questions about the data synchronization process, you can see an overview up here by clicking that. Next, we see IMA documentation and training. If you click that, there's a lot of documentation, like PDFs that you can access, as well as some videos that are available for IMA training. Then if you go further down, you can see some quick solutions. So these are procedures for commonly asked questions, such as maybe how to add a new carton, how to add a new vendor pack, how to update ship points. And then further down, you can see the vendor IMA portal link. That goes back to the portal that we were using to access IMA. And then down here, you can see the help desk. So if you click the help desk, it's going to open up with more information for you, including a phone number for the help desk, as well as a link to a form that you can complete to request help. So to access the online help file, you can click this help button up here at the top right. It'll open up in a new window, and everything is organized based on content. Now, like I said, a lot of this is also used by internal users, so not all of this is relevant to you. I recommend selecting the Data Catalog Vendors section of the content to view information that's going to be more specific to you. You can also use the index and search up at the top here, and you can type in directly what you're looking for, and I find that that's very useful, one of the most effective ways to find what you're looking for, rather than clicking through all of the content. So online, we also have some 24/7 IMA training available. You can go to Vendor University and click IMA Online Training. If you click right here, there are actually some vendor training videos. They're a little bit outdated, but most of the content is still relevant. These were created before I was on the vendor team. But like I said, most of the content is still relevant. And then if you go further down here, you can view IMA guides and documentation. This is the data catalog of vendor guides. So this is what most of you would be needing to refer to. And then further below, you can see the One World Sync and GXS IMA mapping. So you can see what fields, how the fields map. And then below that, you see several quick step documents. This is going to cover a lot of what we're going to be doing on Thursday. So if you need some documentation that spells everything out for you a bit more, after Thursday's session, you can always come here, download these documents, and there's a lot of detailed information in those that go through step by step. So any questions so far? Okay, so over on the right, I'm asking a question, and I'm going to leave this up for a few slides and then come back to it, just to give you a little bit of time to complete it. But I'm wanting to know, for those of you, I know 2 of you I think hadn't been in the grid at all, so you won't be able to really answer this, but those of you who have been in the grid and have worked with setting up new items, I'd like to know what your biggest struggle with a new item grid is. So like I said, I'm going to leave that up for several slides and then come back to that before the demo. So what is the grid? The grid is a Flash-based spreadsheet used to complete product data, and it's used by vendors who send items to IMA using data synchronization. One of the really nice perks of the grid is that you can work up to 50 items at a time. Now, if for those vendors who have to build items manually, they have to create them one by one, and they have to enter all of the information for every single item individually. So it can be very time-consuming. When you're working in a grid, you can put up to 50 items on there at a time. You can copy down a lot of that information from item to item. So instead of entering that information for 50 items separately, you're actually entering it once and then dropping that information down. So it really is much more efficient than doing it manually. So a couple of notes about transmission times. So we only have information for OneWorld Sync and OpenText because those are the two most commonly used data sync providers. For OneWorld Sync, syncing is done hourly between 2 a.m. and 11 p.m., except after 12 p.m. Saturday, Eastern Standard Time. For OpenText, which is also known as GXS, it's done 3 times per day at 12 a.m., 4 p.m., and 12 p.m. So it's important to know that there are transmission times because items may not be immediately available in IMA after syncing. So if you sync over your items and then you come into IMA like immediately afterwards and you try to bring those up in your task list, they're probably not going to be there. It doesn't mean necessarily that something has gone wrong. It just means that you need to wait until the transmission times and then check again to see if your items are displayed. If you're using someone besides OneWorld Sync or OpenText, you'll need to reach out to them and find out when their transmission times are. So many fields can be synced over, but we do have some additional fields that are required in the grid to set up items in IMA. We also have a lot of additional fields that you can fill out in IMA that are not necessarily required. So anything that's required is going to be indicated by the red asterisk in the grid. So here's a list of all the non-data catalog fields that can be updated on the grid. So this is information that's not going to sync over, and you do have to fill out, but not all of these fields are going to be required. So we're going to do a really quick overview through the PowerPoint of the new item grid process, and then we're actually going to go into IMA and do a live demo with more detailed information as I walk you through. All right, so high-level overview. You hover over Data Catalog and click New Items, and it's going to load this page. Now, I do want to point out this note. It's a 60-day inactivity note. So if you've synced over your items and you haven't touched them for 60 days, they're automatically going to be deleted from the system. So what that means, all you would have to do is just resync them to access an IMA. Now, if you want to prevent those from being deleted, let's say it's been almost 2 months but not quite, and you know that you're going to be going forward with this item, you're just maybe rehashing some things out with the merchant before you start the setup, you can come in here and put those items on a grid, and then that 60 days resets. So just I want to make you aware about the 60 days so that when you come in and they're not there, you know why, as well as how to fix that. So once you get to this page, you enter your search criteria and click Get Task List. So all of your search criteria is right here. And one thing I want to note is if you're looking for a shipping marking number, don't put that G10 into this field here because it's not going to come back with any search results. And vice versa. If you're looking for a typical, don't put that G10 in this field here because it won't come back with any search results. I've had several vendors reach out to me after class because they're not able to locate their carton that they're looking for, and it's because they're entering that G10 into the wrong field. Now you can also search by description, and if you're going to search by description, be aware it's very, very specific. So if you put in an extra space or a dash, it looks for exactly what you're typing in. So it's better if you just maybe enter the first word of the description versus trying to enter the entire description, because you're going to be more likely that you're not going to come back with any search results. Below that, you have your vendor stock number. That's a really good way to look for your items if you have a lot that you've synced over, because most vendors will set it up with the vendor stock number for specific groups. And then below that, you have your paid-ins. So most of you just have one paid-ins number. If you are a vendor rep, you may be working with multiple vendors, so you may have access to multiple paid-ins. If that's the case, I would be sure to select the paid-ins number for the items that you're wanting to work at that time. And finally, you have load dates. You have a load date from and a load date to. So if you synced over items a month ago, and then you just synced over items last week, and you want to come in and work on the items that you synced a month ago, you could enter the load date range here, and then it's only going to pull back items that you loaded during that time. So you only have to enter a minimum of one filter criteria to search. So I don't recommend entering too many, because if you put in too much information, you might narrow the results a little bit too much. So I would recommend maybe putting one or two and seeing how many results you come back with, because you can always use the filters on the next screen to narrow those results. So once you enter your information, you can go ahead and click Get Task List, and it's going to load all of your items that meet those criteria in your task list. So in this example, there are a lot of items. There's 8+ pages, and most of you will not have that many items showing up. You may still have quite a few. You could have 100 items or so, and you may want to filter those further here, and you can do that at the bottom of the page. You could enter specific shipping or retail marking numbers. You could enter part of a description. Like maybe you want to work on jeans, you could just type in jeans, and it'll bring back everything with jeans in the description. You can locate the change type. So if you're looking for new items, you could select new. Other option you might have here, there's two other options. If you're syncing over a new vendor pack for an existing item, then this would say OPR new as an option. And if you've synced over changes, then CHG for change would be an option for change type as well. So if you're just wanting to look at your new items, you can just select new. Next to that, you can further filter it by the vendor stock number and again the load date. So whenever you pull up your items, you can select your carton, and then you can click Create Grid. So if you select a carton, there's no need to select all of the typicals below that, because it's going to pull in all the typicals attached to that carton. So once you click Create Grid, it's going to load this page, and it's asking for information that's going to be applied to everything in your grid. Only the red asterisks are required at this point. So you enter your division that the merchant has provided to you for your items. You can select your order dones. Some of you may have more than one order done. Some of you may only have one. You then select the category. Now at this point, the subcategory is optional. If you select it here, it's going to apply it to everything in your grid, but you can update the subcategory in the grid and apply different subcategories to different items within your grid. Then finally, you have the flow type. So in this instance, DSD was selected. If your merchant is wanting you to select a flow type that is not showing in the drop-down, then that means that the order dones that you've selected up here is not set up properly for this flow type. So in that instance, you'd have to reach out to your merchant and let them know that. They would have to work with vendor onboarding to get that additional flow type added to your dones. So basically, all the information on this page, minus the subcategory, has to be the exact same for all of the items that you're wanting to put on that grid. So you can't add items with different categories onto the same grid or different flow types onto the same grid. They have to match up for everything that's on the grid. The only thing that can be different is that subcategory. So once you've entered all that information, you can click Apply. It's going to create your grid. It's going to look like this. This is the default view. And the default view is empty required. You can see that here. And that's going to bring all the empty required fields into view. Once you complete all of the information, so again, that's going to be everything with the red asterisk, you can click Approve. Do be sure to save your grid frequently because the grid will time out after 30 minutes of inactivity. So if you do not save your grid and then you step away from your desk for a meeting or maybe for your lunch break, it's going to time out after 30 minutes. So you will have lost all of the work that you did. So be sure that you are saving your grid frequently. Okay, so there's some information about the grid that displays at the top. Here under grid type, in means new, so we know that this is a new item grid. And then everything that's on this grid is going to reside in the division 24 in category 1. Everything on this grid is going to be going through a DC flow, and it's also going to be set up with the DUNS number 947796. Now we also have this lock over here. If you have the lock selected, then everything to the left of this arrow, all of the columns with the black headings, those are going to stay stationary, and only fields to the right of that would scroll left to right. Now if you click this and you unlock it, then the entire screen will scroll left to right. Nothing will remain stationary. So that can be really helpful depending on your browser that you're using. If you're on a small laptop, you might need to unlock this so that you can more easily access all the fields. Whereas if you're on a regular monitor layout with the large monitors, then you can leave this locked, and I find that it's more useful that way. So whatever selected view you're in, the status of that will display in the top left here. So currently we're in empty required, so that's what's going to show. Now if you select all, then it's going to bring back every single field that you have access to edit. And that's going to update here on the left side. If you go to any of these tabs down here, then those would display up here in the top left of the screen. Then to get back to your default view, all you would have to click again is empty required. Okay, so looks like didn't really get any responses for what your biggest struggle with the new item grid is. So maybe either you're really comfortable with it, or maybe you just don't know yet what your struggle is going to be. So that's okay. We're going to walk through. So give me 1 second to get the demo set up here. I'm going to share my screen. Right. There we go. Okay, so now you should be seeing my screen. And of course it did that. It just is the QA environment. It does that sometimes to me. So I have to close out and open it back up. Give me just a second. There we go. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, so to get to the new item task list, we're going to hover over Data Catalog and then click New Items. So for this screen, this is where you enter your search criteria. I'm actually, to avoid bringing back that really long task list that you saw in the PowerPoint example, I'm going to enter my shipping marking number right here, because that's what I know that that's exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm going to click Get Task List. Okay, so on this page, one of the first things that you want to do, you want to click this plus sign, and that's going to explode your carton out, okay? Now, then you want to verify that everything that you are expecting is actually showing under your carton. We want to make sure all of those eaches that we expect to be in that carton are there. Now, if you are missing any eaches in your carton at this point, you need to stop. Do not go ahead and process this you want to wait for all of your eaches to be in the task list. So you would go back to your data sync provider and resync to get any additional missing eaches into your task list for this carton. So once you're sure that that is what you are looking for and it has all of your eaches, you select that box in the far left column and then you click Create Grid. So this is the page where you enter information about your grid. And again, everything that you enter here is going to be applied to all of your items in your grid. So I'm going to select my division. You probably won't have very many divisions available for you to select, only what your order dones is set up for. And I am having to type in my order dones because I'm set up as a super user, whereas you probably will have a drop-down to select your order dones. Once you've selected your order dones, you can select your category. And then if you'd like to select your subcategory, you can select that here. I'm going to leave this blank just to show you how you can select it in the grid as well. And then finally, you can select your flow type. Again, if the flow type that you're supposed to select is not available in this dropdown, that means that your order dones has not been set up for that flow type. So you would need to go back and talk to your merchant. So we're going to select DC. So then you can click Apply, and it's going to create your grid. Now, depending on how many items you're going to put on your grid, this can take a little bit. If you're putting up to 50 items on your grid, then it's going to probably take a minute or two. If you're not putting that many, it will be much faster. So now we can see our default view. These are all the required fields that are currently blank. So we're just going to go through and we're going to work through this. And you can so we're going to go through each of the fields. Whenever you go through your items, you may not see these same exact fields. It depends on what's required by your division that you work in. It also depends on what fields you may have synced over. There are some fields on here that could have been synced over, like the dimensions and the weights, that for this specific item were not, so that's why they are showing up. So you may not see the same exact fields that I'm showing you. You'll probably see a little bit less, actually. And you may not see it in the same order, and that's okay. So the first one we're going to select is the pre-priced method. And you just select that, and then you drop it down. And then next we have your brand. So you can just start typing, and it's going to pull back everything that matches what you're typing. And then you just select the one you want, and you can click Apply. So I'm going to show you, if I were to click Copy down here, it doesn't copy from cartons to eaches. Okay? So it would only go onto your carton if you have multiple assortments. So you also have to do it for your each. But now, if we click Copy Down, you'll see that it copied that down for all of the eaches. So our next field is going to be our dimensions. Okay? So put in something I can work in my head. So we'll say this is 210.1. And if you remember from yesterday, you have to make sure that the carton dimensions meet that minimum cube sum value of all of your eaches. Well, I know I have 3 eaches here, but that doesn't mean that there's only going to be 3 in my carton. So I need to know exactly how many are going to be in my carton to figure out what my carton dimensions are going to be. So the member quantity lives on the Packages tab. So I'm going to click that. And now here I can see the member quantity. So I can see there's a total of 6 eaches in this carton. So I'm going to click Empty Required to return to that default view. And I'm going to complete the dimensions and weights based upon the total number of eaches in this carton. And then for the weight, Same thing. I see a lot of vendors, when they're going to add the carton weight, they will just add this up and they'll enter 3 because they see 3 ones there. But you have to remember there's actually 6 of these total in the carton. So that would make this 6 if each one weighs 1 pound. All right, next we have our perishable indicator. This is clothing, so I'm going to say no. And then here you can see that there's 2 arrows pointing down just to the right of that. If you click that, it's going to copy that information down. So next we have country of origin. So instead of searching through this whole list, you can just start typing the country name in, and then it's going to bring back everything that matches that. And then you can click Add. And like I said yesterday, you can actually add multiple countries of origin to this. And that's all you would have to do. You just type in the next country and click Add. So now there's 2 country of origins in this. This is useful if you have some sort of product, like maybe a drill, where part of it is made in one country and part of it's made in another country. Then you can click Copy Down, and it's going to copy all that information down through your eaches. Next we have HTS codes. So if you remember yesterday, I said this is what produces that list that the driver gets when he picks up your items, in case he's asked to produce a list of what he's carrying in his truck. So it can be difficult to find an exact match. For example, these are jeans. If I try to type jeans, there's nothing that comes back. If I try to type pants, it looks like there are some options. So you could read through these and you can just pick the best option that match. Another phrase you might want to use would be trousers. So you just find whatever matches the best and then click Add and then copy down. Next we have our fabric. In some instances, depending on your product, this could be metal content. This is a fabric/metal. So you just scroll through here and you pick your fabric and add, and we'll say that this is a mix of 2 fabrics. And then you have to enter your percentage, and that percentage has to add up to 100. And then you can click Copy Down. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and scroll on over here. So next we have some questions. If you hover over this heading, it's going to display some more information for you. So now we can actually read the full question. Does this product or accompanying accessory contain any of the following? And it lists things out. Here we can see apparel, appliances. There are several things that are excluded, and it just directs you to answer no. So we're going to answer no because these are apparel items. And again, click that double arrow pointing down, copy down. Next question, does this product contain PVC? We will say no and copy down. And the next question is asking if the product packaging contains PVC. So again, we're going to select no and copy down. All right, next we have a hazard storage code. So here you can see this drop down. This is what I talked about yesterday, how this was not answered correctly for an item, and some sort of gas ended up on a plane and caused a fire. So this is very important that it is answered correctly. Now a couple of options you may not realize would be under the hazard storage code. We go down to the bottom. You can see there are pet foods and pet chews, and then there's also food products, consumables, and edibles. So it's really important that this information is filled out as well, because if it's a food product or a pet food product, it has to be stored with certain circumstances where it's not next to certain chemicals. So do make sure that you complete this correctly. So this is apparel, so we're going to say not hazardous. And then next we enter our cost and the member cost. And these typically, these match. Now what's nice is after you enter the member cost, it automatically calculates the member cost for the carton. So we can just enter that same information here in the regular cost column. Okay, so moving on, we have our primary store formats. So here we can see several options. Most of the ones that you will probably be working with are going to be either Kmart or FLS for Sears. So we're going to select Kmart and copy that down. And next we see our ship point. It's called ship off from. So here, these are all the ship points of locations where you might have this product for us to come pick up. So when you're doing the initial item setup for your item, you can only select a single ship point that applies to all of the DCs. If you have multiple locations that you want to supply this product from, let's say maybe you have a warehouse in Pennsylvania and one in California, and you want to select the Pennsylvania for the DC locations on the East Coast, and you want to select your California location for the DC locations on the West Coast, then once this is operational, you can go in and do a change request to direct specific DC locations to specific ship points. And we will actually be walking through how to do that on Thursday. But in the meantime, for your new item setup, you have to start with a single ship point for all of your DCs. So we're just going to select one. And you also have to select it for your carton as well. And then next we have our vendor applied EAS tag. Again, that's that security tag. Next to that, you have your projected first in-store date. So this is just the date that your merchant projects that they will have this available in the stores. So it's not super critical that it's exactly to the date, because this is going to go to the merchant row next. And if it's a few days off of what they've wanted, they can always update that when they have it in their row. So don't let that hold up your item processing. All right, so next we have a question about California Prop 65. And again, if you hover over that question heading, it will display the full question for you and the options. So we are going to go ahead and say tested does not contain any California Prop 65 chemicals. And then question 2 is asking if there was a Prop 65 warning label on the package, and we are going to say no. Okay, so we're almost done. We have our subcategory, and we're going to select, we'll say subcategory 3. And again, you should be getting some of this information from your merchant, especially if there are multiple ways that you set up items. If you do set up items for different store formats, different flow types, different hierarchies, then that's information that you'll need to get from your merchant. So if you don't know what that information should be and you didn't get it from your merchant, be sure to reach out to your buying team. If you contact IMA Help, they can tell you how to set things up specific ways, but they can't tell you how your specific items should be set up. So that's why you have to have some communication with your merchants and your inventory teams. And finally, you have another EAS tag question. If you remember yesterday, that's on the item tab and the vendor pack tab, so that's why you're seeing it twice here. So just make sure that they do match. Okay, so all of our items have been completed. If you were working on this at your desk, I would have recommended that you should have saved it at some point after you first started the grid. But now since we're complete and we're done, I'm just going to go ahead and click Approve. And that's going to load the grid history page, which we are going to come back to. So let me get back to the presentation. All right, so right now that's processing in the background. And we are going to have a couple of questions, see how well you paid attention, and then we're going to move on to the grid history section. All right, so question on your right. What's the maximum number of items that should be worked at a single time on the new item grid? Okay, looks like everybody has responded. So we will end that. Everybody got it right. The maximum number is 50. Now, if you're brand new, I don't recommend working 50 starting off because it's going to get really confusing. Start off just working with one assortment at a time. And then you can always work your way upwards towards 50 once you get more comfortable with working in the grid. So good job. All right, next question. Items in the new item task list are automatically deleted after how many days of inactivity? Awesome. Everybody got this one right too. Good job. So it's automatically deleted after 60 days of inactivity. And final question. Be sure to save your grid frequently to avoid losing your work if the grid times out. The grid times out after how many minutes of inactivity? Great job. You guys all got it right again. That's 3 questions in a row. Everybody got it right. So it times out after 30 minutes of inactivity. Awesome. Okay. All right, we're going to go over grid history really quickly. Okay, so when you approve your grid, it loaded that page. Now you can sit there and you can wait for it to process, but you don't have to do that. You can go start working on additional items in your new item task list. You can exit out of IMA completely. You don't have to just sit there and wait for it to process. So if you do navigate away from the page and you want to check on the status, you can do that by accessing your grid history. And you do that by hovering over Data Catalog and clicking Grid History. On this page, you can enter search criteria and click Search. The one that makes the most sense for me to enter is always my user ID, because I want to see what I've been working on. So instead of wasting time filling out all this information, I just enter my user ID and click Search. If you have a partner that you work with at your company, and maybe they went on vacation and you want to double check something they were working on, you could enter their user ID and click Search. So when you're looking at the grid history, over on the very far left, you'll see status and status description. This is the status legend that we have here. We first saw the queued icon right after we clicked approve. And then once it actually starts processing, it's going to show this little running man. Then it's either going to come back as active or check for, sorry, not active. It's either going to come back as check for errors or completed at that point. So if there's some sort of error that's causing it not to be approved, it'll have that exclamation point. If it says completed and has the green check mark, then that means your grid is completed, all the information's good, it's now in the merchant role. So with that said, if something gets completed, you're not going to be able to re-access that grid. So if you need those KSNs, be sure to copy those down before you click approve. You could either copy them down or you could take a screenshot of your grid, but you won't be able to go back into the grid once it's approved. So 2 other icons you might see, if you initiate a grid, you bring items into it, but you never actually save it, it's going to show up as this grid icon with the red exclamation point. It says initiated. And then if you have saved your grid, but you just haven't approved it yet, it's going to show the grid icon with the check mark and say active. So anything that is initiated, active, or check for errors, you can re-access those grids by clicking the grid button on the far right. Those would be in the far right column. Then you also have different grid types. So today we've only been working with the new item grid. There's also something called a changes grid, a return new item grid, and a return changes grid. So we're going to be talking about these more in the next few days. We'll come back to those. All right, so I'm going to go back into IMA. So give me a second while I share my screen again. And we're going to look at the grid history. It always brings up the wrong, there we go. Okay, so this actually went through as completed. I thought I actually messed up the dimensions on purpose so that it would come back with errors so we could look at those. So since this is completed, that means it's fully operational. So I'm going to really quickly access this grid and I'm going to click approve, and I know there's going to be a bunch of errors that come back because everything is missing. I just want to show you guys how to look at your errors before we finish up today. Give it just 1 second. I'm going to go back and finish the final slides in the presentation, and then we'll come right back to this so I can show you errors. There we go. All right, so let's wrap up the presentation, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to access, how to view the errors. All right, so some key points to remember. Double check that all items have synced over for the carton before working the items through a grid. Your buyer should be providing key information for item setup, such as DUNS, flow, store format, SHC hierarchy, required carton types, and agreed upon cost. So if they don't provide this information and you don't know what these should be, reach out to your buying team. If you always set your items up the same way every time, the same types of cartons, same types of the same flow, the same DUNS, same store format, you may not need to get this information from your merchant each time because it's the same. But otherwise, you may need that. Double check that carton dimensions and weights are correct, and save your grid frequently. All right, so let me see if that has finished processing so I can show you errors quickly. I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so here we can see it says check for errors, and there's the exclamation point. So if we click the grid button under action, that's going to reload the grid. So here, there's, like I said, there's a lot in this one because nothing was completed. 158 errors. So some of your errors are going to show up in your default view here, and some of them may have this red highlight. So it's really nice when it does that because it makes it really easy to find what needs to be corrected. Some errors don't always do that. I don't know why they just didn't program it so that all the errors come back like that in default view with the red highlight, but not all of the errors do. So to see what errors you have two options. You can click this plus sign, and it's going to come down with this window. If you have a lot of errors, this isn't the best way to view it because it's going to be hard to work with that scroll bar. So the other way you can access it is by clicking View Errors in New Window. And so now it's a little bit easier to scroll through. You have more space you're working with. But you can look at the details section and you can see the component of your item that has the error. So here we have our package, specifically exploding assortment. If we go further down, we can see there's something with the vendor pack, something with the item. And then if you look in the next columns over, you can see the field that has the error. And then you can see the message. So it's saying here for the depth isn't populated. For weight, weight not populated. So if your field is not showing up in that default view, you can locate where to find it at by looking in this details section. And so we would know that it would be on the package tab. We would know that this error would be on the item tab. So you can go through and work your errors like that. Now if you come back and you have errors and warnings, don't waste your time trying to fix warnings because warnings can be ignored. Once you resolve all of these hard errors right here, it will go ahead and approve through. You don't have to resolve the warnings. Okay, so it is, whoops. One second, I'm trying to get back. Okay. So it is 3 o'clock. I'm not sure if you guys have any questions. If you do, I will hang out on the line for a while. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys tomorrow.